welcome to Student Voice. I'm Lillian Simcox. So, it's spring 2022 and we're back on campus. We were working on a short news package this week about the best and worst things about Chattanooga State, like how we have a beautiful campus, but sometimes it's hard to find parking, and it sparked some conversation. So first, let's look at what some students thought were some of the best and worst things.
I think the professors are really awesome. They're always super helpful. And my least favorite thing is probably traffic.
I just want to say I love the mozzarella sticks in the cafeteria. They're tried and true.
The cafeteria is like the cheapest food you can find within 20 miles. And I think my biggest problem is how confusing some of the buildings are. Like, I can't find my classes if I don't have somebody to help me.
I like the breaks in between and how we can separate out our classes so we can have a break time. I guess one thing I would hate is, I get that we're all in college. We're supposed to have a lot of work, but dude, come on. We don't need to have extended 6-hour-long periods of work. Let me just go ahead and get that clear. That's what I did last night. Let them know. Yes, and then 4 hours of math homework. That's besides the point.
In my first semester, they had these really nice recycle bins in the cafeteria, which you're thinking, great, recycling, saving the planet, that's good stuff. Well, guess what? Went home for COVID, came back, and they removed all the recycling bins. Why? It costs them nothing to keep them here. In fact, look at this. Here, move the camera here. You see this? Do you see this? People just leave their stuff everywhere.
It's mine. Having to do online classes, I'm not an online learner.
7-week classes because they pack too much work in it at once for 1 week. Like this week I had 7 assignments to get done by Friday. That was very stressful and I did not like that. I also think the classrooms could be more presentable. They're very bland. Sometimes they make me want to go to sleep. But other than that, I really like ChattState.
Based on these observations, we got to talking about how some of these are influenced by who we are as students. We'll explain. Joining us today in this discussion are Maura, Caleb, Sunshine, and Nadia. Alrighty. Well, first of all, what are some of the best and worst things about ChattState that you've thought of?
The cafeteria is bussin'.
It really be bussin'. The cafeteria, when I first came to school, everyone was like, I don't know about the cafeteria. And I went over there and I tried those mozzarella sticks. They be bussin'.
And them onion rings.
The onion rings.
I've been buying those onion rings every day I'm here.
The egg sandwich and the veggie burger in the Omniplex cafeteria.
And I will say, as a vegetarian, that veggie burger be slapping. So good.
I think the ladies that serve all the food are so nice. I just
They
love
are.
them.
The biscuits.
Well, I think we can all decide that the cafeteria is where it's at.
Yeah.
Now, here's some serious questions. What do you think are the worst things about ChattState? What could have some improvement?
There's just so much.
The bathroom upstairs in the IMC smells so bad.
Yeah.
It's awful. And parking, as everybody else has said, but parking's awful. It's a nightmare.
I feel like some professors could be a little bit more understanding, on student struggles with mental health or just the workload, because a lot of students work a lot, and sometimes you haven't got time to do all those homework assignments.
Yeah, and on that note, I have a lot of professors, I've been in school for a while, and I've had a lot of teachers that just they don't post anything, and then when they do, it's last minute, so then it messes with my schedule, because you said, people work, we have lives, we have mental health, we have disabilities, so it becomes really stressful, especially when it's an online class. I don't learn well online, I never have, or if it's a a teaching style that just doesn't fit with me, and then I try to get accommodations, but it just doesn't happen. It can be a lot.
Yeah. I don't like how campus is one giant roundabout. Honestly, let's talk about it.
The one way.
The one way.
What's the deal with that? It took me
One-way
an embarrassing amount of time to figure out that there were a few different ways other than just going around the entire campus. So it's a little confusing.
The first time I ever came to campus to get set up for school, I didn't know it was a one-way. So
Yeah.
I went the
Did you
opposite
go the wrong way?
direction
Yep,
out
see?
of
I've
campus.
done
I
that.
had people honking at me, and they were like, just throwing gestures at me and stuff. I was like, dude, I don't know. Then I saw the one-way sign.
The one-way sign.
One-way
Just
sign.
brings so much unnecessary confusion. I do think our
Yeah.
campus is pretty though. I like the little pond in the middle.
You know what I learned recently? We have a second pond.
What?
So there's a second pond. If you go out the west exit, there's another pond over where like human resources and stuff is, which I didn't even know that was over there.
That's like learning that there's another
The business
cafeteria.
Yeah, and there's a
Yeah.
second cafeteria.
That one's good too.
I-
There's a
my
there's a
mind is
cafeteria.
being blown.
I want to
right
know
now.
where this cafeteria is because everyone keeps telling me, Nadia, there's a second
We'll
cafeteria.
have to take a trip
I
down
haven't
there.
found it.
Now I have two
Oh.
cafeterias I have to go
There's
to.
also a second floor on the Omniplex, which I did not know until last semester.
I found that out by accident.
Yeah, someone was like, "There's a second floor over there." And I was like, "What?" There's just a lot of stuff on this campus where I'm just like, I did not know.
I love the plants in the OMN building. Like, it's so pretty
Yeah.
with the sunlight.
I do like the plants and
This
all
is
the,
so
We had a bunch
peaceful.
of cool sculptures on campus too,
Yeah,
like
we do.
super random ones.
I'm feeling some very positive vibes. So as we continue on and unfold, do you think there are any issues on campus for persons of minority groups or even certain ethnicities or LGBTQ? And this is student voice, so everybody's welcome to open up and talk.
Well, I can't speak on minorities as a white woman, but as far as being feeling safe and welcome as a member of the LGBTQ community, I feel super safe here, and it's nice. I feel like there's no judgment. I've been to UTC, and not to like talk about like sorority girls and stuff like that, but like I don't know. I feel like a little more judged in other areas. So yeah, I feel good about it here. Really nice teachers too. Sorry. Go ahead.
As a person of color, I will say I definitely feel more welcome here. I went to a very non-inclusive high school, so there was a point where I was the only Hispanic person in my entire upper school, which was very strange. And then going to college and like meeting other people of color was like they exist too. Like I'm not the only one. I have had problems with like ableism and stuff, you know, as someone, I just recently have been learning that I have a lot of disabilities that I didn't know I had, and so struggling to find like workarounds with that, and you know, I do a lot of times get diminished, you know, being called lazy or that I'm just not a good student, but you know, it's not that simple, so I have had problems with that. But as far as like my race goes, I would say it's been pretty okay.
Yeah, the school is very diverse and very safe as a woman of color and part of the LGBTQ. I would say that we should have more conversations about improvement though, because I know in a lot of classrooms, a lot of students will get uncomfortable speaking about these things. And I feel like it should be more open to talk about these issues and just, but it is very welcoming here. I will say that for sure.
There are definitely people trying, which is
Yeah,
important.
there's a lot of people trying.
Yeah.
That's important. I think that's the big difference between here and, you know, my other experiences is that not everywhere you go people are willing to work with you and try. And I have at least come across a good amount of people that are willing to, you know, listen and help out in any way they can, which is always appreciated.
Definitely.
I think the difference too between per se, like, I don't think a lot of people, especially here, I don't feel it, are against, you know, people for their other personal preferences. I think it has a lot to do with, you know, the agenda or whatever's going on in the outer world of politics and things like that, that the actual community as a whole is pressing towards. And I think personally that's where I find my disagreement. But as a person, you know, talking face to face, you know, I don't find issue. It's the agenda in the community, what they're pressing towards.
What makes you call it an agenda?
So, say there are agendas where we are having people walk into classrooms of young ones, you know, 5, 6, you know, second, third graders, you know, talking about their gender or talking about, you know, sex and education and things like that. When we send children to school to learn, you know, the basics, ABCs, 1, 2, 3, you know, I believe when they're able at that age to make a choice for themselves what they want to claim, you know, I think that's perfectly fine, politically speaking as well as just morally. But I don't think we have any business to push an agenda, though, towards
think that's-
the most vulnerable
I don't think that's
of us.
really an agenda, though. I think it's totally fine for young kids to like learn about gender and explore it because they're going to be confused. Like I played
Yeah.
with Barbie dolls when I was
Yeah,
a
and there's
kid.
nothing
Yeah,
wrong
I
with
played
that.
with G.I. Joes. Like,
You know, and I
Love Legos.
grew up. My mother never discriminated me about it, but I grew up thinking it was wrong because of gender roles in society, especially in the early 2000s
And I
and
think
early 2010s.
what a lot of people don't understand is that like most people know who they are
Yeah.
for a very, very long time, like from when they're like 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
So it's like easy to say like, oh, kids shouldn't be talking about stuff like that, but at the same
Yeah.
time, like it's already in their mind. It's just like
Yeah.
the idea,
It's the fear that you
like the seed is
Yeah.
plant is already there. You
it's,
know what I mean?
It's the fear that
Yeah.
you won't fit in and that you're not normal.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference, that there's this fear that if we talk to children about sex ed, about identity, that they're and gender, that they're afraid that they're going to get a warped perception. But the truth is like,
Right.
you know, as a person, you know what you feel. But if you don't see representation, like, you know, if you don't see, like, it's becoming a big thing, like on Disney Channel shows, they have like
Yeah.
LGBTQ
Gay
plus
characters and stuff,
characters,
yeah.
and that's
Which
huge
is-
because if you're a part of that community and you don't see that, you know, in mass media, and you just see man and woman together, you might get a warped idea that it's not okay to feel that way about women or men,
Yeah.
depending on where
Yeah.
you lie on the spectrum.
And then people are like, oh, that we shouldn't show children that, like, that's sexualizing stuff, and, like, children shouldn't see that. Okay, well, then don't make the prince and the princess kiss, then, you know?
Yeah,
like-
Exactly.
It's not
Well,
even
personally-
like it's not sexualization either. Like
Yeah.
showing people who are like in the LGBTQ community isn't
It's not perverse or
It's not
anything,
perverse.
yeah,
Like it's just how people are, and it's normal and okay to let kids grow up and realize that it's okay to be that.
And-
way.
But that's
And I don't
unfortunately
think
a
that,
subjective
and, you know,
opinion.
in the
That it's not
household, I
perverse.
don't think, you know, that's a bad thing if this is the way your family is raising your child.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there comes a time where you need to draw the boundary between, okay, between mom and dad. Like you said, my mom.
Right.
My mom was okay with this.
Yeah.
So who's to say they can just walk into a classroom and teach my child something that either I don't think they're ready to hear about, or I don't want them involved in quite yet.
I guess that kind of comes down to, you know, if we're talking about the public education, because private is different. Private, that's its own thing. If we're talking about the public, like, you know, government-funded education, that would be a thing of, like, you know, when is the appropriate time to start talking about these things in a public classroom setting? Because there is a difference between talking to your parents about it versus talking to your
someone-
teachers about it. But on that flip side, you know, you might be in a situation, not everyone has very open, accepting parents, so they might need that
Yeah.
support system at school.
And which I'm not
So-
saying they can't get that support system, but when we have people pushing that agenda to children, when we are sending our
It's not
children
like they're
just
pushing
I don't
it.
think
No,
it's an
it-
agenda
it's
more
not
so it's
being
just
pushed
it's
and,
just
like,
showing real life.
I
You know,
nobody's-
like
I just
Sorry.
know that when I was a little girl, I wanted to be represented because, for example, I liked American Girl dolls, and I wanted a black one.
Yeah.
But the only black American Girl doll I got was a slave. And she was a runaway slave, and that was
Yeah.
my doll. And I appreciated that doll, but now thinking back on that, I'm like, wow, there's literally no representation for people of color, for LGBTQ, because I didn't find out I was part of the LGBTQ until like high school
Yeah.
because I wasn't exposed to it when I was little. I didn't even know what being gay was until like 7th grade.
Right.
I really didn't. And I feel like if people find like who they are when they're younger, if like they're more educated about it, then they'll find the people like that's right for them, like loving family, loving friends,
Yeah.
and that was to make it easier for them to like live in like society today.
Yeah. And to go back to like the my mom statement I made, I want to make it clear that like my parents didn't teach me about gender. My parents didn't teach me about like gender identity or gender roles. And like that would have been so important to understand that like what I was doing was totally okay. Right? Because it shouldn't be bound to like one group of people. Like if I want to play with Barbie dolls and I'm a kid, I'm gonna play with Barbie dolls. And I shouldn't be forced by society to think that I'm any less of a man for doing that. Right?
Exactly.
And like I also don't think I don't think anybody's going into classrooms and teaching kids about sex.
Well, that
I
I will say that on a false note.
Yeah.
There had been a story and don't quote me, but there had been a story about people coming to classrooms and showing sexual orientations with stuffed animals and things of that to children. And
Well,
all
if it's
I'm,
orientation, that's teaching you what like
all
gay and straight are. Like, I mean,
all I'm
that's just
saying
something
is
people
that
need to know.
all I'm saying is that personally, I think that some of these conversations belong outside the classroom. You know, inside the classroom for, you know, second, third, fourth, you know, fifth, kindergarten, you know, they're there to learn the basic 1, 2, 3, ABC, phonics. I don't think it's needed, you know, to explore that as a whole. You know, if I
Right.
have a child who wants to talk about it in the class, you know, you can feel free to talk about it, pull them to the side, something. But then you're just kind of overstepping a boundary that some people may not want to overstep. And if you do want to overstep that, that's fine. But have a conversation
No, I mean,
about
I
it
can get with
on the
that.
side.
Like, I don't
I understand the
necessarily think
perspective, but-
kindergartners and stuff. Like, I don't think it should be totally left out of schools
No.
and stuff. That's like just where I think like there's a big discussion about critical race theory being taught in school, and I think
Yeah.
that is absolutely necessary. And people are so very against that. I mean, I
People
think.
also don't really know what it is.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
it's just like the American education system is so like there was this history book in Arkansas that they were legitimately teaching to their students, and like Trump was in it, and like when he got impeached, it was like he got wrongfully impeached, and so like this was like in their actual history book. So like kids are getting like indoctrinated all over the country.
Yeah.
Like if we think about it, like what did we learn Thanksgiving was like
The Indians and the Pilgrims came together
And
had a
one
meal.
ritual.
Yeah.
We thought it
feast
was that, but
together.
in reality,
It wasn't.
And it was okay,
genocide.
and it
It
was
was
okay to
mass
wear the Native
genocide.
American headbands as a third grader
Yeah.
parading
Yeah,
around.
literally, we put on little plays and like had pilgrims and Indians and stuff like that. Like,
We didn't realize that was wrong.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I didn't learn what genocide was till high school. I was like, bam.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that.
But I mean, that's just a thing, though. Being kids, though.
Yeah.
You know, there's an innocent to being kids. And, you know, from that perspective, yeah, as you go back in history and you look at the history books, it's written there that it was messier than, you know, dressing up as Indians and pilgrims and having a great feast.
To be fair, my
But
history
there's
book
a,
is
you
there.
know, there's a boundary between, you know, at some point, yeah, they do have to grow up and they have to learn about these things. But right now, all they know is that I have friends, we're all dressing up, and we're having a good time, and we're learning about kindness and friendship
Right.
and putting a hand out.
But wouldn't
I
you?
guess-
But
So-
wouldn't that be kind of discrediting children though? Because children
Yeah.
are smarter than we realize.
They are,
children
but there's
understand.
I understand. Like I don't. I never had my parents never sat me down and explained to me what sex was when I was a kid. But based on watching TV, like I understood that it was
Right.
Me too.
something adult and something that like wasn't for me. But I kind of knew what it was.
I mean,
or
there-
children that like mental health is at all ages. Like
Yeah.
there are kids that commit suicide as early as like kindergarten and stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Especially members of the LGBTQ.
right, and so I guess what I don't understand is why, as Americans, and this is just a generalized thing, but why Americans are so afraid of those topics, of sex, of mental health. Because if you look at places in Europe, like PG-13 movies and stuff, like sex is everywhere and violence is rated R. But here's the
Right.
opposite.
Drinking
Violence-
age is so much
Yeah.
lower. Like
Yeah.
children
Yeah.
are just they're
So it's just interesting to me, like we've had this idea in our head that these things are tainted, that they're too adult, that they're not safe for consumption, but they're all natural things that everyone experiences at some point.
And there's a way to like teach children about things
Yeah,
without
there's a
impeding on innocence.
There's a soft
Right.
approach. Like you
Like-
don't have to just straight up be like, oh, we killed and raped
It's like a fine line.
millions of Indians
And I
like,
think
or Native Americans.
As far as like to circle back to what we were talking about, like this agenda, I think it's more about teaching kids to accept themselves and accept other people. Because I grew up in a time where like you were not taught that. Like I grew up like post 9/11, right? Like immediately post 9/11. And that was a weird time.
Yeah.
Like you were taught to demonize other people. And like it was all American nationalism. And now we're at a time and in a progression where we don't have to focus so much on nationalism. And we can teach children to be accepting of other people, whether they're, part of the LGBTQ community or if they're a person of color. Like it doesn't matter. And it's good to teach kids to be accepting of their own gender and understand where they stand on like gender roles and everything, right? Because we're trying to get away from these standardized sexist institutions that are gender roles. right? Like, I'm not going to teach my son to be misogynistic. You know, if my son, like if I were to have a son or if I were to have a daughter and they were struggling with gender identity, I would rather them learn about it. I would rather them learn about what it is and like what gender really is.
And I think it comes down to then, like, once again, deciding what you want for your child and what you think is best, because that then depends on who is teaching my child that.
Right.
If, you know, if you want your child to learn that, okay, then who do you want to learn it from? You or somebody else? Like, I'm sure between you and me that you wouldn't want your child coming to me and talking about this, because obviously we have different standing views on it.
Yeah.
Well, that won't happen,
But
though,
that would be-
unless they feel like they can't talk to their parent, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, if their parent is
But I'm
like,
just saying though, that comes down to the, you know.
Did we finish? But yeah, like,
We're gonna need to wrap up.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry.
I found a nice way to put a bow on this.
Okay. All right. So
I think we just go right to the outro. Don't worry about
yeah.
the last question. Let's just.
I had a good end
Wait,
statement.
I have a good end statement
we
too.
got
Yeah.
two questions.
Yes, we're gonna have to, once you do some kind, we're gonna have to wrap up. Any final thoughts? We'll go around
Okay.
and then do the outro.
okay,
okay.
I dropped my phone.
I'm sitting on my.
Yeah.
Okay. I know. I felt like the clock was ticking, but
I was like,
I looked around and none of the cameras were going. So.
Yeah, that's why I said, are we done recording?
Alrighty, y'all. Well, as lovely as this discussion has been, I think we're gonna have to wrap up. I know we all have some personal opinions about this stuff, but I think they're all very valid. And as we move to the future, I hope to hear from everybody. Any last thoughts?
I think at the end of the day, you know, no matter what your opinion is on any of these things, I think the matter of the fact is everyone just wants to love and be loved and feel like they're heard and appreciated. So as long as we go forward in these endeavors with the best intent for those around us and ourselves, I think that's what really matters.
Yeah, I guess my final thoughts is there is no agenda. We're just in a period of time now where it's more publicized and okay to be accepting of other people regardless of who they are, right? And for that to be taught to people.
I just know that as a society, everyone needs to do better and being more accepting and helping minorities, people of color, people LGBTQ, and just admit when they're wrong and just try to learn from everyone. Like, you can take advice from anyone or just learn just to better educate yourself, I would say.
Yeah, just listen to each other and love each other.
All right. Well, this has been a really enlightening discussion. For more information about the inclusion on this campus, visit the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and share your concerns. Have a great day. Glasses. That's what I learned. That's what I learned.